Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel, or welcome to it. I'm really glad that you're here. I'm going to start off by asking you to please subscribe to the channel. Please also put that little plus sign underneath the video if you're watching on Rumble, a little fire sign underneath the video if you're watching on Odyssey. And if you're still watching on YouTube for some reason, please give it a thumbs up and then get your ass over to Rumble or Odyssey, all right? Where there's no big tech censorship. So today I decided to put my money where my mouth is and do a video on something other than COVID. I've been looking forward to doing that for a while. I'm still looking forward to the day when I feel like I can just let COVID go because they have let it go and they're no longer trying to infringe on my life and on my medical freedom and on my medical privacy. That day is not today. They still have not let it go, so I'm still going to keep talking about it. But for today, I'm taking a little break. And I want to talk about Alice Marie Johnson. I found out about her from the Megyn Kelly podcast, which I also recently discovered. I know people have different opinions on Megyn Kelly. I really don't care. Look, I was politically uninformed, politically uninvolved, just politically ignorant up until about a year ago. And so I'm still catching up on a lot of stuff. I like Megyn Kelly's podcast, and I especially liked her interview with Alice Marie Johnson. It was very compelling. If you don't know who Alice Marie Johnson is, she is the woman who was wrongly imprisoned with life without the possibility of parole, and who was eventually commuted. Her sentence was commuted by President Trump, and then she was offered a full pardon by President Trump after Kim Kardashian, of all people, appealed to President Trump about her case. So backtracking a little bit, Alice Johnson, in 1993, she was arrested, her first offense, for a non-violent drug crime. And she became involved in this drug trafficking after a pretty hard period in her life. She lost her job of 10 years at FedEx due to her gambling addiction. Her marriage ended, and she also lost a son to a motorcycle accident. So Johnson was not the leader of this group by any means. She never brokered deals. She never handled any drugs, but she did deliver coded messages for this operation. She was arrested with, I think, like 10 other people, all of whom essentially ratted her out in exchange for dropped or lesser charges. But Alice Marie Johnson ended up getting life in prison without the possibility of parole. She started serving her sentence in 1996. She ended up serving about 22 years of it. During President Obama's term, the end of his term, I think 2016, yeah, he pardoned 231 individuals in December of 2016, right after his last term in office ended, many of whom had similar drug-related charges to Johnson. And Johnson thought for sure she was going to be one of those people. She met all of the criteria and exceeded it, and she was denied. To this day, the reason why is still unclear. So then fast forward a little bit, a couple years, Kim Kardashian somehow finds out about Alice Johnson, I think on social media, and she gets together with Jared Kushner, who was President Trump's senior advisor and also, of course, his son-in-law, and they go back and forth for months. Kushner had been working on the Prison Reform and Redemption Act, which aimed to reduce the rate of recidivism and to prepare prisoners to reintegrate into society. And eventually, Kardashian met with President Trump, and on June 6, 2018, Trump commuted Johnson's sentence, and Johnson was released. On February 5th, 2019, Johnson attended the President's State of the Union, and President Trump asked her to stand, to which members of Congress gave her a standing ovation.
Over the next 22 years, she became a prison minister, inspiring others to choose a better path. She had a big impact on that prison population and far beyond. Alice's story underscores the disparities and unfairness that can exist in criminal sentencing and the need to remedy this total injustice. She served almost that 22 years and had expected to be in prison for the remainder of her life. In June I commuted Alice's sentence. When I saw Alice's beautiful family greet her at the prison gates, hugging and kissing and crying and laughing, I knew I did something right. Alice is with us tonight, and she is a terrific woman. Terrific. Alice, please.
And the Washington Post reported in February of last year that 3 of the women President Trump granted clemency to this week had one thing in common. They were all in prison with Alice Johnson, the former drug dealer whose sentence Trump commuted 2 years ago. So Trump went on to work with Alice Johnson to find other people in prison who were either wrongly imprisoned or, had really turned their lives around. Crystal Munoz was Johnson's adopted daughter in federal prison. Tyneese Hall and Johnson prayed together, and Judith Negron performed with Johnson in dance productions. And they all ended up getting their sentences likewise commuted by President Trump. When Trump freed Johnson in 2018, the 3 hoped their own appeals for clemency would one day also be granted. That day came on Tuesday when President Trump cut short their sentences, in part based on Johnson's recommendations. The relief granted to the 3 women is the latest example of the unorthodox ways that Trump chooses to exercise his clemency powers, having sidelined the traditional pardon bureaucracy administered by the Justice Department. Clemency advocates have long argued that the Justice Department, traditionally led by tough-on-crime former prosecutors, opposes too many offenders who are deserving of leniency. And he went on to do it at least one more time, this from the AP in October of last year. President Donald Trump on Wednesday granted clemency to 5 people convicted of committing drug and financial crimes, all of them cases that were pushed by prison reform advocate and Trump ally Alice Johnson. White House Press Secretary Kayleigh McEnany said Wednesday in a statement that Trump was granting the clemencies in light of the decisions these individuals have made following their convictions to improve their lives and the lives of others while incarcerated. President Trump has been hammering Democrat Joe Biden, presidential candidate, over his tough-on-crime record during his time in the U.S. Senate. Biden, as head of the Senate Judiciary Committee, helped shepherd the 94 crime bill that many criminal justice experts say contributed to harsher sentences and mass incarceration of Black people. Alice Marie Johnson went on to speak at the RNC last year in 2020, and I wanted to share a little clip from that.
When President Trump heard about me, about the injustice of my story, he saw me as a person. He had compassion, and he acted. Free in body thanks to President Trump, but free in mind thanks to the Almighty God. I couldn't believe it. I always remembered that God knew my name, even in my darkest hour, but I never thought a president would. When I was released on June 6, 2018, I ran across that road and hugged my grandchildren for the first time. I'll never forget that feeling. And then I remembered the promise I had made to the men and women I left behind, that I would never stop fighting for them, and I haven't. I'm using my voice to tell their stories, and I pray that my face reminds you of those forgotten faces. 6 months after President Trump granted me a second chance, he signed the First Step Act into law. It was real justice reform, and it brought joy, hope, and freedom to thousands of well-deserving people. I hollered, hallelujah! My faith in justice and mercy was rewarded. Imagine getting to hug your loved ones again, and to think this first step meant so much to so many. I can't wait, because we're just getting started. The nearly 22 years I spent in prison were not wasted. God had a purpose and a plan for my life. I was not delayed or denied. I was destined for such a time as this. I pray that you will not just hear this message, but that you will be inspired by my story, and your compassion will lead you to take action for those who are forgotten. That's what our president, Donald Trump, did for me. And for that, I will be forever grateful. God bless you. God bless President Trump. And God bless America.
So I'm sharing this story for two reasons. Well, three, I guess. One being I wanted a break from the COVID stuff, and I didn't know about this, and I felt like I should have known about it, and more people should know about it. And the reason I think more people should know about it is that we have been told over and over again. For some reason, we're still told it, even though President Trump is no longer in office and people just like cannot let this go. We are still told that President Trump is a racist, just period, point blank. He's a white supremacist. We are told that any of his followers, no matter what the reason they follow him, no matter what the degree they follow him to, anyone who does not hate this man and spend their life hating this man is a white supremacist, is a racist. And here's the thing, it just doesn't compute. It does not compute. It does not compute if you have any kind of respect for Alice Marie Johnson, for her harrowing story, a story that you probably yourself have not experienced. If you have any kind of respect for the fact that this woman has had a different life experience than you and came out with maybe a different opinion than you.
And I want to tell you, I don't know if you know this, Megan, but at first, the very first step act that was being presented to the president did not have sentencing reform in it. But it was after seeing my case, and if you go back and you look at the news clips when he did the press conference, he talks about me and asking them to put sentencing reform in. He said he does not want to see another case like Alice Johnson's, because
Wow.
the first time when Kim and Sean took my case into the Oval Office, and I've said that Oval Office became the courtroom, even though she was a famous person bringing it to the president, I had to be a worthy candidate to get this still. It wasn't
Of
just Kim
course.
Kardashian. It had to, so when the layers were pulled back, he couldn't believe that I actually got life for what I did, because whatever might be written or what may have appeared in newspapers after my sentencing, he looked at the actual paperwork and to say what I was convicted of and what I did. And little did I know, and that was on my birthday. I just had a birthday too, May 30th. But she went on my birthday, and seven
Oh,
days
wow.
later, I'm running across the road free. But that caused a chain reaction. My case did, to literally touch the heart of a president, because that's he was, as he said, one of the people that did it his own way.
Well, Alice, we're told that President Trump doesn't have a heart, that he is a racist, awful man. And you say?
I say I have seen none of that. That I was able to approach President Trump about other cases, and he granted many of those cases, many of those people freedom. And it was never just Alice Johnson has these cases. I submitted over 100 cases to the president, I mean, to the pardon attorney's office, to the White House, personally myself. After vetting them, I worked nonstop on cases. And he brought me into that Oval Office a number of times and asked me to tell him about these cases.
Wow. I didn't know that. That's amazing.
And these people are set free, are at home today. Pardons, clemencies, things, people that would never have gotten out of prison. I was able to literally speak to the president personally about these cases. So you ask me, what do I think? I thank God for this opportunity to go before the president the way someone went for me. Because at that time, Kim went, it was not popular to go, and she went anyway. And when I went, I don't care about the popularity. I don't care about being counseled. I don't care about anything but the people, about justice.
If you have any kind of respect that she's able to apply her own critical thought to life, if you believe that she is an authentic, intelligent woman who has lived a life and is allowed to have her own opinion, even if it's different than yours, then you at least have to question, okay, is he racist, really? Or is he as racist as I have been told that he is? Is he truly a white supremacist? See, President Trump did have the support of many black voters. He had the support of many, many Latino voters. So if you think those people are allowed to have opinions that are different than yours, are allowed to have conservative opinions, then you have to consider the fact that maybe Trump is not as racist as you think he is. Now, if you think that those people are brainwashed by society or have internalized white supremacy or are not allowed to have conservative opinions, they need a white liberal to come save them, then I guess you're going to go on continuing thinking that Trump is every bit as racist as the media has told you. But see, I think it is actually racist to not allow people of color to have conservative opinions, to not allow them to support Republican candidates, to not allow them to support MAGA. I think that's racist. If I'm allowed to do it as a white person, they should be allowed to do it too. People are allowed to have different opinions. I am allowed to say that I'm not a feminist as a woman. And if you sit there and tell me that I've internalized the patriarchy, I think that's pretty sexist because you wouldn't say that to a man who said he wasn't a feminist. So I think it's all kind of BS. And I think it's important to hear these stories and listen. I don't think that I've said before that President Trump is not the candidate that I would tailor build if I could tailor build a candidate. I am critical of him in many ways. I don't think that this story absolves him of everything, like, oh, he's a saint or something like that. I'm not saying that. But I think it's important to hear these stories, to hear the opinion of other people, people of color who have different opinions of Donald Trump, and to understand that the man is not Hitler, the man is not the devil, and certainly these are not the actions of a public white supremacist, of an avowed white supremacist, all right? And the second reason I think this is important, and it kind of ties into that first reason, is that people have blind hatred of Donald Trump. And I blame the media for this. The media did not and still will not let up on President Trump. Half of the stuff you were told about him are lies. Look, I drove 80 miles round trip to vote for Clinton in 2016, and purely to vote for Clinton. I was so uninformed. I knew nothing else about the ballot. I just voted for Clinton. I was still registered in a different county. I had to drive 80 miles round trip to do it if I wanted to vote. I did that, okay? I never would have thought I would be here saying the things that I'm saying to you. And when I had my big political shift last year, I was floored to find that I had been lied to so often about President Trump. Not saying the man is a saint, not saying he's the greatest president we've had, just saying that the media lied about him very often. And I personally felt betrayed. And then I started feeling like, okay, if you lie about him so much, if you have to make up lies, take things out of context, then maybe he's not really as bad. If you have to lie about somebody, maybe they're not as bad as you keep telling me. So I have to find out more about this man. And I ended up voting for him. All right? That's a whole other video. But point being, if you live your life in, you don't have to vote for him. You don't have to want him to be president, whatever. That's fine. I would question, your voting for Joe Biden, but that's also another video. But if you live your life with blind hatred of this person, live your life obsessed with him, that is only not serving you. See, I'm not obsessed with Donald Trump. I don't think that he is my savior. I don't think he's the most perfect president. He had Operation Warp Speed, which gave us the vaccines very quickly. I am very critical of the vaccines, obviously. I do not do whatever Trump tells me to do. He is not someone that I just put on a pedestal. But the people who hate him, they are obsessed with him. They do, honestly, Trump derangement syndrome is like an accurate description of what is going on. People are still talking about him, and he is no longer in the White House. And that is not serving you. that is making you blindsided, because the man is not a saint, but he's also not the devil. He's not Hitler. He did do some really great things for the Black community. He did great things for this country. Everything that came out of his mouth was not a lie. I mean, if you just have hatred of this person, you think that everything they did, everything they said is awful and horrible and evil, and you're wrong. You're not as informed of a person, and you can't see things as clearly as the rest of us who don't suffer from this Trump derangement syndrome, where I have a more nuanced approach to him too. Yeah, some stuff he did was really great, some stuff he did was not really great, and some stuff was neutral. That's the reality. That's the reality thing of most things, by the way. And this is what we get when we have Trump derangement syndrome. So this is from The Hill. I know I said I wasn't going to talk about COVID, but just bear with me a few more seconds. The Hill from June 17th of this year, titled "Fear of Link to Trump Motivated Expert Skepticism of Lab Leak Theory, Scientist Says." A Canadian scientist and Harvard postdoctoral associate said colleagues might have feared vocalizing support for the Wuhan lab leak hypothesis out of concern that it would be viewed as showing support for potentially inflammatory views espoused by former President Trump. Alina Chan is one of 18 experts who signed a letter in May calling for a thorough exploration into the origins of the COVID pandemic. Although Chan voiced her support for an investigation into the possibility of a lab leak early in the pandemic, she told NBC that experts were careful not to lean too close to views linked to the former president. Quote, "At the time, it was scarier to be associated with Trump and to become a tool for racists, so people didn't want to publicly call for an investigation into lab origin," she said. That is mind-blowing. That is mind-blowing, and that is what Trump derangement syndrome gets us. And Trump derangement syndrome does not just apply to Trump. It applies to Trump supporters, and it applies to, frankly, anyone who is a little more right-leaning than most people on the left. It is not just about Trump. It is heavily focused on Trump, obviously, but what it got us is during a global health crisis, actual expert scientists, professionals in their field, highly educated people far smarter than I, were hesitant to say, in many cases publicly, this looks like it came from a lab, because they did not want to be associated with President Trump. And you can, look, I'm not saying Trump behaved perfectly. I certainly have been very critical of his lack of decorum, and maybe he bears some responsibility for the fact that, it became taboo to talk about lab leak, but he was and is a politician. I mean, he's not really a politician, but he was a politician. Your job as a scientist, your job as a professional, is not to align with political views. Your job is to speak the truth. There will always be crappy politicians. In fact, I would argue that's redundant at this point. If you are a politician, you are crappy in so many ways. It is still your job as a scientist to not be worried about that, and to not be worried about what kind of political views are you aligning with. That is where Trump derangement syndrome gets us. This is the most serious crisis of our time. The Chinese party, not the Chinese people, have gotten away with literal murder. And it took us a year plus to admit, oh, this looks like maybe it didn't come from a lab, because we all hated Trump so much. And that's where your blind hatred short-sights you. It doesn't work for you as an individual. It doesn't work for us as a people. It doesn't even work for us as a globe. Blind hatred is never going to serve us. Because the fact of the matter is that not everything Trump said was terrible and horrible and evil and racist and Nazi and fascist and whatever else you think. But if you hate him so much and you won't listen to a word he said, well, then here we are, not being a serious people during a global health crisis. So I just wanted to share that story with you. And I hope maybe it makes you consider things in a possibly different light. I understand it's not going to change your whole opinion of a person, but just consider things in a possibly different light. Because if you continue to think that Trump is a white supremacist, is a racist, then you have to think that every person of color who supports him is dumb. and blinded and has been coerced and is not able to have their own critical thought. And obviously, you have to think that every white person who supports him is racist. And that's no way to go about living your life. And it's actually a racist way to go about living your life. So maybe just think twice about it if you're here watching this. I appreciate you so much for watching. Please remember to take personal responsibility for yourself. That's what Alice Marie Johnson did and does. I find her very inspiring. And until next time, bye-bye.